Today, the Bible reading comes from Micah, the minor prophet, the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Amen. Today we have a special, not preacher, but one of us. He's going to share his wonderful experience with El Camino Santiago.
You tell me when it's about time to get the hook, right? Okay. The reason why I put this together like this, at the men's breakfast, I had a PowerPoint. And before I knew it, it was about an hour and 15 minutes later, and I probably could have talked for another hour. And so when Pastor told me I had a time limit, I thought it was a really good idea to make this so I could limit myself to 20 minutes there and try and talk and also answer any questions, to be honest with you. It was probably one of the, outside of the, marrying my beautiful wife or my birth of my kids, I have to say that this experience was probably the other most important thing I've ever done in my life. And I had no idea what I was in store for, physically, emotionally, and in some ways, most importantly, spiritually. I remember Pastor Alexis telling me, for those of you that know my journey a little bit, Pastor Alexis walked most of the same. I think I walked probably an extra 160 miles or so, or 70 miles more. But she told me there's she says, well, have a good time and try to keep room for God. So I thought that was kind of weird, but I said, okay. For me, this journey was almost the same as my journey in my own life of finding my Lord, of finding my God. Yes, there's a lot of people I walked with that they were walking for sport, to stay fit, to challenge themselves. And I knew all that ahead of time. But for me, from almost the very beginning, the first night when I left Astorga, where I arrived, it was kind of a lonely day for me. And I had dropped Aiden off at a friend's house in France, and I've traveled by myself before, but everybody around was having all this, seeing all these young people, all these pilgrims around. And I just sat there on my first dinner and was like, okay, sure, pray God, is there going to be somebody I'll talk to on the way? And the next morning when I started off, and I'm like gangbusters, I'm all going, and I get to the edge of town, and I'll never forget it, because all of a sudden those little yellow arrows were gone. And I'm going, really? I got lost in the first 10 minutes out of this entire Camino? I don't know where I'm going. And behind me, right after I said that, right after I prayed to God, I go, please help me find a stupid arrow. From behind me, I hear this noise. And then all of a sudden I realize it's in English. And come around the corner are the three people who probably became my closest friends right there that morning, 6:30 in the morning, walking 15 minutes. Leslie, Jennifer, and Julie. Jennifer and Julie actually went to school together, and Julie still lives long ways away, Benicia. Okay? So I went 6,000 miles to meet my closest friends who live, 35, 40 minutes away. But we ended up walking. Jen, this was her fourth Camino. Each I only did a wimpy 160, 170 miles. She did, the real Camino's 500 miles, and she has walked it 4 times in the last 2 years without one blister. You have no idea how jealous I am of that. My feet got tore up. The men's breakfast, Dave gave me a good tip and said, please, you want to limit some of those feet shots. And I thought I had limited for them, but I really limited here. Last thing, I do want to part with just 2 quick things, and I'll afterwards in fellowship, if you have any questions, believe me, I can talk about this much longer than you'd want to hear. But there's 2 big moments for me that I go back to. One is the very first night in Rabanal, where it's my first stop. We're climbing up the mountains, and I hear about this amazing place. The Confraternity of St. James ran it, and it was amazing. And in there, we're all sitting around. They make tea, and my wife would love this too, because they had like water infused with mint and all kinds of other goodies, you know. And of course British, so you had to have tea, of course, too, and biscuits, you know, cookies. And we're sitting around, and everybody's just sitting there talking. And I meet this German man who spoke very little English, but I struggled through with my German, and we talked, and he was an amazing guy. And I had no idea the effect that this one guy would have on me until later, when I found out the next day, actually, that he was walking the Camino as kind of like his last rites. His goal was, his goal was to show his family that he was strong. And he didn't even know if he was going to make it. The last thing he wanted to do while he was on earth that he wanted to do was to show his family that he was strong enough to make it all the way to Santiago. So for me, when I found that out, you know, he was dying of cancer. And cancer, for those of you that don't know, obviously it's been a kind of a big part of my life lately. And one of my goals to go there was to show that, you know, myself, maybe the rest of the world as well, that, you know, I'm not going to let cancer define me. Cancer is not me. And so when I went to the Cruz de Ferro, I had no idea. I'd seen it in the movie The Way. It actually looks a lot nicer in the movie. I tried to show it from the nicer side. It's right alongside the road. I remember walking up and go, really? This is it? It's like, I feel like a bus could stop by there at a time and 100 million tourists could pop off, and it just seemed more remote in the movie that I watched. But nevertheless, it kind of had an effect on me. I had carried 2 stones with me to the Cruz de Ferro. The point of the Cruz de Ferro is that you carry a rock either from home, or you carry a rock from somewhere along the Camino or somewhere in your trip. And as you get closer to Santiago, the goal is to lay down that stone on that. You can see it's a huge pile of stones now. To lay down that stone, and you know, it's a way of letting go of your sins before you get to Santiago, or for some people it's letting go of the burdens that you might be carrying with you. And you know, I thought when I was this whole cancer thing, I thought I was doing pretty good. You know, I mean, I felt like I was open, I was honest. I felt like I had done everything on the up and up, and I had no secrets, and everything was great. And I got to the Cruz de Ferro, and I carried 2 rocks. One rock was specifically for my family and some really, you know, private things there. But the other rock was specifically for my friends, and 2 of them who I've lost that have been cancer. I like cancer champions, I prefer, than victims. But you know, I walked there, and I waited for all my friends to leave, and I dropped my pack off and went back up the hill, and I knelt down and I prayed. And for those of you that don't know me, I have never been the biggest prayer guy in the world, and I found myself praying a lot. And I got down on my knees and I started praying and laying those rocks down. And before I knew it, as you've seen here today, I lost it. Every little bit that I guess I was holding inside, I sobbed like a 2-year-old. I finally got up, put the shades back on over, did a little wipe-a-rooney and pretend that everything was great, and proceeded to walk the longest walk of the day for me. And it was the highest point, and then it's a strict downhill. I'd walked over 21 miles that day. And that day is a day that I probably tore my feet up, even though I changed socks along the way. And but it marked for me a turning point, really, because it was obviously the most physically spent I've ever been in my entire lifetime. And it was an incredibly emotional day for me, but it was also probably one of the most spiritual 24 hours I've ever experienced. I think I felt like I saw God a few times as I was almost passing out, but that's another story. And the last thing on that I'll tell you is that a God moment for me happened that night. I was done. I thought I was going to stop at that beautiful little place where the river was, and everybody got up to leave again. I go, whoa, where are we going? Another 5 miles down the road in 98-degree heat. And I'm going, okay. And I got there, and my feet were just on fire, and we're waiting that long line to get into this albergue. And that's when I just took my boots off and stuck them in that fountain. My friends are going, hey, I don't know if we could do that. I go, hey, they can tell me to take them out. They're on fire. It was like steam coming off. And they went out anyway. I settled in, and I was hungry, and I just walked out, and everybody was gone, looking at the Templar Castle, and I just was done, and I needed to get fuel. And I walked out, and there was somebody handing a flyer to a restaurant that was close by. And so I walked there. It was the closest one. I hobbled in my flip-flops, and feet were killing me. And the only time in the entire trip, normally you have a menu for two courses, maybe a dessert, and a bottle of wine or water or whatever you're going to drink. And I get to this place, and it was the only time I didn't have a choice, but they gave me 4 plates plus dessert. I probably ate 4,000 calories that night. Honestly, I'm really not, if I'm exaggerating, it's a couple hundred that I'm exaggerating, not thousands. But the amazing thing is that the next morning, although my feet were hurting, I felt fully refreshed. And that was the only time in the Camino that I was ever offered that much food, and it was the only time in the Camino that I ever needed that much fuel and food. And so it was one of those moments where I said, I got to just trust God. I just got to trust God that he's going to get me there in hopefully one piece. And that's why when I got to Santiago, me and Nacho had split up to kind of walk the last bit ourselves. And Julie and Jen, all them, I think they were there like 100 hours before I got there. By then I was hobbling the last few days and kept texting me, are you here? Are you almost here? Are you almost here? I was like, sorta. I'm having a cafe con leche outside of town, but and so I walked in, and I knew it was going to be a party with everybody there. They've already processed their Camino hours before me, and I remember walking in. There was a small little chapel right there before you can go in, and at the very end. So at the very beginning, the Cruz de Ferro, and at the very end, I walked in that chapel with my backpack on, and didn't even take it off. Just plopped down on a pew, and that was the second time that I cried, because I just thank God that he got me there in one piece. I had been in so much pain, more pain than I've ever been in my whole life, and I was never happier, other than marrying my beautiful wife and my kids. So anyway, I'll stop there. Yeah.
Can you tell them about your nickname and how you got it from your friends?
Yeah, see, I had a tendency of, those arrows were really problematic sometimes, and I found myself getting lost. And I was up where those cows were. I mean, it was really steep hills, and I was really my feet were in incredible pain. And so I'm walking down, and I think that was the one time I happened to be listening to a book. I was listening to a book, and I was just doing my own thing. And my friends are long gone. They're going at light speed pace, and I'm going at the new Rick Dunn pace. And I'm going through, and it's like over these hills. It's like steep going down. There's cattle, I hear cow bells everywhere. And all of a sudden the path's just getting narrower and narrower. And I look down, and there's no footprints. There's like over 200,000 pilgrims that walk this in a year, right? So there should be footprints. I'm not the first guy. I'm going, holy crap, what happened? And I look back up the hill, and I'm going, hey, I'm not going all the way back up there. I'm like 2 miles back up the hill, and I look around, and I look straight down, and literally I'm on a hill like this, and I see a ribbon of a road going this way. And I'm going, okay, I'll just get to the road, and I'll figure it out there. And I go, but I don't know which way to go. Do I go left or do I go right? So I'm thinking about it. I had my phone, I turned it on. I had paid for international stuff, and I had some limited data. And I try to get on Google Maps to see where I'm at, and there's no data, there's nothing. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I go, well, it's like 1 o'clock, and so there's not that much shadows, really. So I finally decided, I used my pole, and I stuck it in the ground where I could make it a sundial. And I saw on my phone it was 1 o'clock, and so I went and I stood to where it was 1 o'clock, found out where north was, and then I looked down at that road again once I had my bearing which way was north or south, and I said, okay, that road's going south, was it southeast, and this road's going north, northwest. I know Santiago's to the west, and so I went and I jumped down through those little electrocuted fire wires to keep the cattle in. I'm climbing over there and battling like I was like, it's crazy, down this stupid hill, and I get to the road, and it's back to the clickety-click of my poles, and I walk in, and I'm walking around, I'm just hoping to God, I speak 12 words of Spanish, and, I'm hoping, and so I ended up getting there, and I got to a little tiny town where I turned my phone on for a second, put in Tria Castella, got the map, turned my data off, and I looked, I'm going, oh, okay. I turned out, I walked probably about an extra 3.5 miles going that way, and I should have gone that way. So I got there late, and my friends are laughing at me, of course, because I'm an idiot and I got lost again. But they're looking at me. I said, there's just not enough kilometers I could walk in a day, and I just wanted to add some extra ones. And so they called me Galileo for a while after that. Anyway, if there's any other questions, I don't want to keep you here too long. And if anybody ever thinks, by the way, there are people walking the Camino with parents that are younger than my youngest and older than, the oldest person I met on there were in their 80s. And they walked the whole 500 miles through the Pyrenees, through northern Spain. And then it gets kind of flat, and then it gets very mountainy again where I was at. And I'd say the three women that I met, they were in their 50s. I'm 57. I traveled later on home to go pick up Aiden with a kid that was, 20 years old, that came from Copenhagen. So it's really everybody. There's nobody here that, that couldn't do it, And I can push Nance, so we maybe we'll go again. Okay? So think about it. If you ever, it's an amazing experience if you ever get an opportunity. Anyway, thank you.